Hi, welcome to our podcast today, Worried About Nothing. We are going to be talking about politeness.
Yay!
Not so bad for my first one, I suppose.
Very good. What do you have to say about politeness, Danielle?
Oh, man. It's a driving topic for me today. I get a lot of frustration around it when I feel like people are being polite just to be polite, or if they're being polite on the surface when you can tell that they're not actually intending to be polite. Two things that really kind of grate my nerves a little bit.
Well, and this is exactly what I was writing about this morning in my diary, saying that how much programming we have around it, and that we need to teach, kids and everyone to be polite, which is great. Obviously, it keeps nice relationship and everything, but at the same time, it separates the people so much, just because, by being polite, we're hiding away real emotions, real feelings, and the honesty that we have to say. Instead of being honest and say, hey, I actually don't like it, we're trying to be really nice and polite and say, hey, yes, it's actually not too bad, or it actually looks great, even though you don't mean it. I remember coming to my manager's office at some point, and I don't know, she was wearing something, I don't quite remember, and I said, oh, this color doesn't look too good on you. She still remembers it. She said it was really funny. I think she was shocked because I said, no, you don't wear this color. And she told it to my colleague at some point, but she laughs at it because she just loved the honesty.
Did she stop wearing that color?
I paid attention because it was just at that moment and it felt right to say that. So I haven't really been paying attention exactly every day what she was wearing and if she wore the same color or not. But it just felt right. I was being honest. And at first she didn't like that much honesty. She told me that, I have to watch my mouth, as she told me. But later I think she actually enjoyed it, because when we had to say something to other people, she'll be like, okay, I think you can say it. Because people already know what to expect from you. So kind of, in a way, using me so that I can deliver the message.
No, it's true. There are a lot of people in the workplace that they're afraid to be direct or blunt with whatever message needs to be conveyed because they don't want to be seen a certain way. So if you have someone who's comfortable and they don't care what anybody else thinks and they can just deliver the message, it can be a real asset, because it's like, finally, the message can be conveyed because you have someone who, isn't afraid to say it.
Yeah, and that's true. I remember we had a situation at work. I had, program manager calling me and saying, hey, when this check will be ready, why it's delayed, blah, blah, blah. She made such a big deal out of it. And then it's been sitting there for a week. And next time I see her, I was like, so did you pick up this check? She's like, no, I didn't. I was like, well, I guess it wasn't that urgent. Why did you make such a big deal out of it?
Good question.
Yeah. I think it's funny, isn't it? Politeness can be a very much a cultural thing sometimes, because I live in the UK and politeness is such a part of the psyche here. And like Danielle, you were saying at the beginning, it can have a dual purpose. So sometimes it really is politeness on the surface, but there's so much meaning underneath it, so you can say to somebody, oh, that's great, thank you very much, which means I hate you so much and get out of my face right now, or whatever else. And it was a bit of a culture shock moving here, because I grew up with a Polish mother. And I think maybe Polish mothers are a bit like Russian mothers, I don't know, but there's that absolute directness. They speak their mind. And I remember growing up, my mum had a group of Polish friends, and they'd all get together, and us kids, the kids of the Polish mothers would get together going, oh no, what are they going to say now? Oh my God. They'd just, forthrightly say, you look fat in that, or this is terrible, or, and they'd say really nice things as well. So everything that they felt and said, they'd say. But there was just a bit of a running joke with us. because it was very, very direct. It was kind of like, oh my God, you look awful. What have you done? It's terrible. It doesn't know you. No.
And it's the same culture in Russia where I grew up. It was exactly the same. So it was really shocking I'm still struggling with my mother-in-law because she grew up in Mexico, and it's all about, being really polite, don't say what they mean and things. So she's still finding it shocking that I can actually say things directly, and she's struggling with it so much. But yeah, that's exactly how I grew up. Now it's changing, which is in a way a bit sad. It's all about being nice, being polite. But when I grew up, it was exactly like that.
But it's such a waste of energy. I mean, I know it's very ingrained in me, the politeness thing, and I'm trying to kind of shed it. But it's such a waste of energy and time, because you end up really lying about so much in everyday conversation. Even the kind of the initial egoic greetings. The hi, how are you? And you say, oh, I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, we even did that right before this when we first got on. You were like, hi, how are you? And I was just like, good, going with it. And then I was like, well, today was actually really busy for me, and got into the real conversation. But it was just so automatic for me to be like, good, yeah, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're not saying things to not hurt people's feelings. Like when people ask you their opinions about something, even if it's just as simple as, how does this look? And let's say it does look terrible. And you say, oh, you look great. Well, you're not really helping that person at all.
No, not at all. But some people don't want to hear it, but then they shouldn't be asking.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I actually remember when I worked in Scotland, it was a slightly different culture anyway with the people who I worked with. So I would come in the morning and say, hey, how are you feeling? And they would say, hey, I feel like crap. It was the worst morning ever. Or I had to drive through something. So they were really honest, bluntly honest.
Yeah, the Scots can be, definitely. And the Australians as well. When I went to Australia a few years back, that was so refreshing because they would just tell you to your face everything, so it's like, you're really annoying me, go away, or whatever it was, or, oh my God, why are you wearing that? Or, and it was just so nice. Everything was just out in the open, It was a bit of a culture shock to me coming from Britain or from England, where everyone's like, tiptoeing around each other to go to that absolute bluntness. But it was familiar. I grew up with it, so I did recognize it. But at the same time, it kind of, I recorded a little podcast yesterday just about judgment and about being sensitive and all these kind of things. And I think when you're sensitive, or when you're overly sensitive, I guess, to people's words and tones and that kind of thing, it can be a bit shocking. But then it shouldn't be shocking because it should be taken in the spirit in which it's given. And sometimes, bluntness and lack of politeness can be intentionally rude or intentionally hurtful. But when it's just somebody stating a fact in a very neutral way, I think that's a good thing. It's very refreshing. I mean, with you, Katya, it's one of the things I like best about you is the fact that, you know what you're gonna say, what you think, or you feel. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah. No, it's true. And it is a lot of waste of energy. Why do you really have to say, you don't want to be rude, of course, but at the same time, I can understand why it can be shocking to other people, especially if you never grew up in this kind of culture. And it's like you would take it very personally because that's not the culture you grew up in. And it will take a lot of time to adjust, I think.
But it is another kind of hiding, isn't it? Being polite. I mean, overly polite. I mean, the sort of courtesy politeness. For example, if I see somebody who's an older person walking down the street and they drop something, I'm not going to kind of, kick them out of the way or whatever. You might help them pick something up or whatever, but that's not politeness as such. But when you don't speak about what you really truly believe or think or share, it's a form of hiding again, because you're not sharing who you are. You're just creating this massive wall of empty words that you hide behind. So nobody really gets to know you. Nobody sees you. You don't really connect with people. And there's no real exchange as well. Because you can have, hours worth of polite conversation, which is just extremely draining and inane, really, because you don't really talk about anything.
Yeah, I think it's difficult when you try to come from that place of truth and not kind of cover it with politeness when other people aren't willing to meet you there. Because I really want to express myself in that way. in this meeting that I have tomorrow. And while I hear the words that say, yes, we want to be transparent or we want to be open, there's just something inside of me that's like, I don't know exactly how honest I can be with what I want to convey. I just feel like it's going to be taken the wrong way. Because I'm always a pretty positive person when it comes to work. I like to find solutions for things. I'm not a problem-oriented person. While I can get frustrated, I always look for the solution, though. I don't just like to complain about what's going on. But sometimes I don't feel like people can hear that when I try to speak honestly. It's almost like I have to tailor what I say in a certain way so that it's received the way that it's meant to be received.
I guess that's part of it as well. You know, it's so looking at Aratima, the way that she speaks to all of us, like at retreats, it's especially obvious, you know, when she's talking to different people. And the way she's said in the past that it's about meeting people where they are, so meeting in the middle almost. And so it's finding that place, I guess, of truth, which is where we all want to be and come from, and using language that the other person understands. Because I guess if let's say you're trying to be as honest and truthful as possible about something, and you meet somebody who is so deeply enmeshed in politeness and self-defense and hiding away, and you come out with like the pickaxe of truth, they're not going to understand at all. So I guess for me anyway, the part of the journey or the learning is to find that balance of what is true, being direct, expressing myself, fighting the fight, as it were, as Jason would say, but also doing it in a way that is heart-led and meets the person rather than hits the person. I've kind of veered between the two. So when I was younger, I was very, very direct, to the point where I would just tell people to get away and you know, I would tell them what I thought about them. And then I went through a real kind of, oh no, that's wrong, that's bad phase. And I tried to muffle it and smother it, and it got kind of couched in this politeness. And now I'm coming out of that again, and it's trying to find the balance between the two extremes. Because I guess it's that middle way thing, isn't it? The way through the center, I guess the way through the heart. But it's a journey, I suppose. It's always a learning curve. Because I think sometimes truth can want to come out in such a way that would just, you know, blow people down or blow people away. And I've experienced that as a younger person, to the point where I used to get quite violent sometimes. So if they really annoyed me, I'd punch them, which is terrible.
I can't say that I've never hit anybody. So.
That's a good thing.
I said that I can't say that I never hit anybody, not that I ever hit anybody. Yeah. It's just, I guess sometimes for me, it's a desire to be understood. And it's like, obviously hitting someone's not going to get them to understand you. And that's not what I mean. But lessening that desire to be understood, but still somehow communicating the truth, I feel like that would be beneficial, because I think it's the desire to be understood that maybe limits my ability to communicate as effectively as I could, because maybe there's too much focus on them understanding what I'm trying to say. It's kind of weird not having that as a goal, though, when you're communicating with someone.
I also feel that this politeness is also kind of leading to being good, right? Like doing the right thing, and just, you know, and I can see that even with my husband, he's always so good. He always needs to do the right thing. And it's great because he can get a lot of accomplished and he can be on the top of things. But at the same time, I can see him from time to time deeply suffering from it, especially if he doesn't get the results he's looking for. Yeah, and when you're so stuck in that programming of just, you know, being good, being polite, and you don't see that, you don't meet it, this is where you really struggle, because you don't understand other people, you might be judging. And as I said, that causes really deep suffering inside out. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. I mean, as somebody who has kind of carried the being nice mantle for a while, it's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, because you spend so much time wanting to be liked, you know, and looking at yourself from the outside in through other people's eyes. and not acting naturally. I mean, being polite and being nice, it's like an acting role. It's not a natural way of being. And so you're constantly not really being yourself, which is exhausting.
Mm-hmm. And on some level, I think that the people who you interact with from that place can tell. So even though they might consciously like you, I feel like they'll detect something within themselves underneath and be like, yeah, they're really nice and there's no reason why I shouldn't like them, but then something might still feel kind of off.
I think that's what you think, Danielle. I think there's a lot of people who actually like that politeness because that's what they grew up with and they feel really comfortable. They feel like they're in the same boat. They're not willing to step out of that programming, right? And I've seen those people who just get attracted to those who are really, really polite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely can happen. But I think for those that maybe are more sensitive to energy or to sensing, below the surface, there's a real lack of alignment that happens, So like the expression, not walking your talk. If you're very politely telling people nice things to their face, a number of things can happen, either that bursts out and talking about bad things behind their back, or it just gets so pushed down that there's just a lot of other emotion that's stuck, rage or whatever it might be. So sometimes if I'm talking to somebody who's overly polite but obviously doesn't mean what they're saying, it's so strange because the smile is there, the tone is there, the words are there, but there's a real kind of other energy behind it that just doesn't line up at all. And it's strange because I think people do, maybe subconsciously or sometimes more consciously, see that and feel that. So you might be kind of drawn to the politeness on the surface because it's safe and it's comfortable if that's what you were brought up with.
Mm-hmm.
But then you'll generally, I think, sense on some level what's underneath it. So that in a way kind of perpetuates the cycle of politeness, because if you sense that from somebody, there's no way you're going to want to open up to them. So carry on doing the polite thing and they'll do the polite thing. And then you'll end up having 2 hours of absolute nonsense, no conversation whatsoever. Then you leave going, oh, well, I didn't share anything about myself, so it's fine.
Everything is wonderful. Oh, I feel so good. Oh, the sun is shining. Oh, how wonderful. The life is just beautiful.
The weather's so great. We talked about it for 4 hours,
And then you don't need to open up. Weather is a perfect topic.
There's fear as well, isn't it? I guess it's kind of hiding behind that mask of the social dance, the catchphrases or the stock phrases. Like Danielle and I were saying at the beginning, it was like, hi, how are you? Good, how are you? That kills 2 seconds. And it's kind of, you can move on to the next stock exchange, as it were, stock phrase exchange. I guess for some people it's a way of connecting, people that don't know what deeper connection is.
Yeah.
To the lonely people or people, sometimes you see, those elderly people that live on their own, they don't have conversations with anyone during the week. So when they go out, they just want to go, hi, how are you? And talk about something trivial because it's some form of connection. It's an exchange of, it's an attention thing at least.
Yeah, I think on some level that could be genuine too, or at least that they're seeking to genuinely connect, but they might be doing it in the only way they know how, which might be through politeness or like the stock exchanges. It sounds funny to put it that way, but I'm going to go with it. I like it. So the default, I suppose, exchanging. I don't want to keep saying stock exchange, even though I like it, just because I don't want people to think we're talking about the stock exchange, which I know nothing about.
I guess that's it, isn't it? Because everyone really, I think, is seeking for that some kind of deeper connection, whether they admit it or not. And it's so much programming. I mean, politeness, as Katya was saying, is so much programming that some people just don't know how to break through it. But, you hear about that. I mean, you kind of hear stories about marriages that are just politeness all the time, and they kind of get to the end of their marriage and they don't really speak about anything. Apart from, the peas are nice today, or the salad is green, or whatever,
Yeah, and then you can stay on your mobile phone or read your own book and don't really communicate.
Not connect at all.
Who needs the real connection nowadays when you can go to the restaurant and see a couple just texting each other on the mobile phone? The best date ever, right? You might as well do it on the computer and just bring some green salad.
At least you can step with the bananas then, you know. But yeah, as you were saying, Katya, I think it can be so restrictive though. And frustrating when you're in a relationship with somebody who is putting up that kind of politeness, and not even putting it up consciously, but because it's kind of ingrained in them, you know, with the upbringing. It's so interesting how that happens though, isn't it? You know, what you're brought up with or as in behavior and the way that you are with people. It's so different culture to culture and country to country, and, you know, even different parts of the country to country. You know, there's so many variations. And it's when they become conscious that you realize, because sometimes you don't even know, you know, because like when I was growing up, I didn't know that everyone else's mother wasn't like mine for many years. You know, I thought everyone's mother kind of directly told you were rubbish at things. So it's strange, you just get used to it, don't you? You adjust to what you know.
Well, I grew up in the same culture of being direct. My grandmother would tell me if she didn't like something that I would do, she would tell me, no matter how much you feed the wolf will still go back to the forest.
Yeah.
And she was talking about me. So no matter what she does for me, I'm still looking for some sort of freedom or to run away in a way.
Oh, well.
Because I didn't like the limitations and, you know, that was imposed on me.
I guess that's part of it as well, isn't it? The kind of the cultural aspect is that countries, I mean, like my mother, for example, grew up in real poverty like I've never experienced. I've been very fortunate not to experience, where, you know, in her family, they didn't have enough shoes for the whole family. So if it was raining, one person would wear the waterproof shoes and the other people wouldn't, you know. And they shared a bed and they didn't always have food, all of this kind of stuff. And I think with that kind of living environment, there's no time for politeness. There's no time for, you know, wasting time. It's kind of, you have to work and you work and you work and you work and you sleep, and then you work and work and work and you sleep. So that directness is part of the culture.
Because your basic needs are not met, right? Now we grew up in a culture where all our needs usually are met. Usually we have a house. Well, in most of the developed countries I'm talking about, we have a house, we have food, kids don't need to struggle so much. We're not going through like a war, I mean, you know, where people are being killed. So because all the basic needs are met, we have time for other things that, you know, our families may not have time for that when they were younger. And I just remember, you know, in the past when I worked in the financial industry, again, there was not much time, because if you don't get out of the asset, you might end up with, some sort of, cows delivered to your house, you know what I mean, or to the financial institution. So you get out of the position really fast. And if they were missed out for some reason or something happened, and, you know, you call to the traders and they just swear and there's no politeness. They just say, get out now. So it just talks about luxury of time.
Yeah.
When there is none, you don't have time about it to say hello and all of that.
Yeah, it's so true. It is a luxury. Politeness is a luxury in some ways. And all of those things that aren't about basic survival, I guess, are a luxury in some ways.
And we do have luxury of time right now. Luxury of silence.
Yeah. But that's another interesting thing about doing these podcasts, I think, because I remember the first time when Danielle and I did a recording in Harrison, and there was a silence. And my immediate instinct was, oh no, that's it, let's end it. Let's stop recording. And it's nice to just kind of not do that and just sit through it, because why not?
Especially because we had an awesome conversation after that didn't end up getting recorded.
Oh,
so true.
We talked for like even longer than what the recording was, I think, after the fact.
But I love how Jason pauses and wait for something to come out. So instead of just talking, he pauses and I guess transmits or waits until there is the next thought that is forming. So it's kind of nice too.
And that's politeness as well, isn't it? You know, thinking, oh, I must fill the silence with something, you know, whereas it's not necessary.
Right. Yeah, I think it comes from fear of judgment, right? It's like, oh no, if we're not saying something, then something's wrong here or something, you know.
I don't have anything to say. Why are we recording this? What our audience will think. That's it. We're run out of ideas.
Episode 2 or 3 and we're done. All our ideas are gone.
Very short series.
Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. Signing off now. No.
And please click link down below to check out about Aratima and Kim's soul reading and Jason's YouTube channel.
And Katya's spell thing. I'm going to make you do it now. It's going to be in the description box. They'll be looking for it.
You should put something like that saying, yeah, watch out for the skirt. The skirt is coming.
Hurry up and get it done.
You won't be able to procrastinate then. Be like, Katya's skirt will be in store by next week.
I guess I wonder if that's got something to do with the way people are culturally, you know, politeness-wise or direct-wise. You know, thinking about extremes of temperature, like Russia and Poland get really cold, and like Australia gets really hot, you know, and those extremes kind of cut down, whereas England is kind of middle ground. It's pretty mild, rains a bit, well, quite a lot.
Well, think about Canada. It can be quite extreme too, and Canada is famous for polite people. I think it's the most famous country for people being really polite.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. Yeah. Okay, there goes that theory.
I was enjoying your theory though as you were coming up with it.
But I do agree that a lot of cultures are based on whether it's a warm or cold climate. So, for example, usually people down south are more open, they're more willing, you know, they want to hug each other, they're more like hot and flirty and, you know, and all of that, and a little crazy and don't so much mind the time and like to have their day nap and, you know, typical stereotypes. And people in the winter, they more cold. And that's true. I've seen it. I've experienced it. They don't have so much the huggy culture. Well, oh my dear, let's hug, let's kiss, and all of that. So yeah, I would say this is quite true. And to do the same with spices, when we look at Ayurveda, a lot of it is actually quite true, because in the northern climate, there is a lot more people who have, you know, more likely to be Pitta or Vata, while people on the south more likely to be Kapha. And therefore, they eat a lot more spicy foods and things like that, while people who are in the north, they're more looking like Pitta. They don't really consume a lot of spices. The food is quite bland. So it's kind of interesting to look at it that way.
Yeah, I don't really know much about Ayurveda, I have to say, just from snippets that you speak about or Atima or other people. Something I'd like to learn more about. I think it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, there's nice spices. Like that's what I don't really use a lot of it, because I didn't really find that a lot of it was suitable for what I was eating. But I do like some ideas. I do like to use some spices. Even when I make my hot chocolate, I do like to put a bunch of spices, and it feels really warm. It just feels really nourishing.
Yeah, I like spices and things. I don't know if it's because I grew up with them, but yeah, spicy flavors, strong flavors I like.
Yeah, if I can add herbs to things just to change things up a little bit, spices or herbs, I like it. It really feels, I guess, nourishing, but there's kind of like a magical quality to it. It's kind of hard to explain.
There is different kind of spices. What I was talking about, people like more like Kapha, I was talking about hot spices like chili peppers. But there's other kind of spices, like when I make my hot chocolate, things like cardamom and even things like fennel seeds can be quite strong, but it's a different flavor. It's kind of interesting. I don't, for example, because I grew up with it, I don't find it's being strong at all. But my husband, he can eat lots of hot chilies and lots of like hot spicy food, but he finds that fennel seeds are too strong for him. It's kind of amazing to see.
That's interesting. I don't know if I've tried fennel seeds.
Can you drink milk?
I do drink milk, yeah. I haven't for a while, but I can drink it, yeah.
Okay, the little recipe you can try, about a cup of milk, then about a tablespoon of cocoa powder, then a good amount of fennel seeds, cardamom, cinnamon, a bit of salt, and you can add a bit of sugar or maple syrup or whatever you like as a sweetener. You warm it up, you let the spices to absorb, and then you drain it because you don't want to have fennel seeds in your mouth, and enjoy it. It's really delicious.
Sounds nice. Sounds like a taste explosion.
I used to make a chocolate chai, like hot chocolate with chai tea type spices in it. And I felt the same way. It felt really nourishing. It wasn't the same as just drinking a regular hot chocolate where I felt like I would have that spike, in blood sugar and then come back down. I felt more stable. Whether or not that's true, it was my experience.
That sounds nice. I think it's so important, isn't it? I mean, this is something I'm learning to do. Just listening to what your body wants to consume, and kind of being guided into what you put in it, at any time. Because I think that's another thing that can happen is that, unconscious eating is something I've been doing for so long. But I'm trying to be more aware and more conscious now. And it's something that I know some people have done for years and years and years, but just kind of looking at foods and kind of feeling into, does my body want that right now? And does it want a bit of this? And at the moment, it seems to want to eat loads of garlic. So it's quite good we're in lockdown because I'm eating loads. But it just seems to really want it. So I'm having cloves and cloves of garlic. But that's a good thing. I mean, something I need to be more aware of and kind of learn more about. The subtle changes you feel when you're eating certain things. Like, I'll eat something that my body really craves and I'll feel the vibration going up or going down if I eat something that's not what it wants at all. And that can also be that unconscious thing of, you just reach for the comfort food, the kind of, I want some chocolate, I've had a bad day, Yeah,
it can be really amazing when you eat something that your body is happy about. It's because I remember I was eating Ezekiel bread toast. I was making a kind of like garlic bread at work. Interesting. People actually liked the smell of it though. I didn't get many like negatives for it. But I can remember eating it and my body just kind of like being really happy. It's almost like you can feel like your body's like, thank you, thanks for eating this. Like I've been eating brown rice since I've been home because I really don't have the patience to cook it myself. Plus I've been on the high protein diet. So now that my mom's doing a little bit, she does all the cooking here, but now that I'm eating what she's cooking, I get to eat brown rice, and I'm finding that my body's having a very similar response to the brown rice as it did to the Ezekiel bread when I made it. And I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. As the body wants this brown rice. Like, okay, it feels nice.
Yeah, and I think it's all about coming back to truth again. It's kind of, feeding the body, what the body speaks, what the body does. And it's really being respectful of the body.
It's funny though, because I didn't even know. It wasn't like my mom was making brown rice, and I was like, I can feel that my body wants this, but it was like after eating it, it was like the response that I got from my body. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's happy. My body's like singing right now.
What I found quite amazing is every time I go to Moscow, because I think I changed the food, I tend to lose weight. It's kind of interesting. And I haven't been doing a lot of exercising. It was mostly sitting. But I still lost quite a bit of weight, which was just the change in diet can make a difference.
What was the change in diet? What were you eating different?
I don't know. It's not really a lot of difference, but I wasn't really like bread, for example. I would be eating a nice brown bread with lots of molasses, something that was really popular during the Second World War because it was considered very nutritious. And a lot of people were not, just by eating that bread, were able to survive because, as I said, of its nutritional components, of nutritional value, I guess. So things like that, and just mostly eating when I felt like eating. Because when you have kids, and as you say, a lot of it is unconscious. If they're screaming or something like that, you kind of want to comfort yourself. And you might reach out because with kids, you might have a bit more sweets in the house, even though I try not to, have a lot of sweets in the house and have kids all hyperactive on the sugar. But it may still happen. I've been baking for them, so there's a lot of baking and things like that. So I might be reaching out for those just to feel more comfortable. But when you don't have this kind of things, it's much easier to actually listen to what your body needs.
Yeah, it's those unconscious patterns. As you kind of go through life, I guess everyone, but just speaking for myself, as they come up, you're like, oh my God, this has been running my life for how many years? And you don't realize it's just that unconscious, everything that you do that's unconscious, obviously, because you're not conscious of it, but it can really direct your behaviors so much. You know, I mean, like unconscious eating, for example, just the reaching for food and eating it without even realizing you're eating it, then feeling really full and not very pleasant, and continuing. It's all kind of pushing things down and, you know, smothering and trying to eat your emotions, as the classic phrase goes.
Mm-hmm. I have been thinking that, because I noticed that now that I'm in a house that has foods that I can snack on. I keep pretty much no snacks in my house. It's just better for me. If I know they're there, I'll generally want to eat them. So I noticed that sometimes it's not necessarily the sensation of feeling full. It's like you want to feel full, but I think of it as also being fulfilled. Like if you had the sense of fulfillment, then you wouldn't be looking for the sense of fullness in your stomach, which usually I don't think people get a real sense of fullness unless they get that bloating sensation. Because I know when people eat on a cleaner diet, at least it's true for me, I don't get that real strong sensation of being like, oh, I'm so full, which I feel like some people look for that before they stop eating. But if you're eating a clean diet, you're hardly ever going to feel that way.
But, well, you do, because you have certain quantities of food that you get used to, right? And if you start eating a little bit more, you feel like, oh, that's enough. I actually don't want any more. You might
I
not
guess
have
I
that,
just
that
don't have that
fullness.
experience.
Okay, that's my experience. I might not be full.
Stomach
I might not be
capacity.
full, but I feel like that's it. I'm done. Like that's enough, and I can stop at that moment. It's like I don't need to finish this. I can have it for dinner or leave it for the next day.
That's good though. That shows that you don't have that programming around food, or the unconscious eating, or the reaching for it in certain areas, you know, because people that do, and I include myself in that, with the unconscious eating, a lot of it is to push down emotions. So you feel something and you eat just to smother it, or you know, feel something else and you eat to smother it, and it's like a constant cycle, or it has been. It's changing now, but it's, you know, people like yourself who don't have that. You eat in the way that food is supposed to be eaten, you know, for nutrition and to fill you, and then you stop, you know, which is, it sounds very simple, but it's the way it's supposed to be. But again, it's one of those things that people use and abuse. It's sort of like a drug in a way, I guess, because you reach for it when you need the crutch, or you reach for it when you want to stop feeling, or when you want to feel something else.
Feeling the comfort. I watched an interesting documentary at some point where the guy was really, really obese and he had to go for the surgery, otherwise he wouldn't survive. And he said that every time he was upset or they had an argument with the mom would always cook something for him. So he would end up eating so much. And, you know, and also obviously after the after the wars, many times it was considered that you want to stuff your kids with lots of food to make sure they're healthy and make sure they have enough. I think it's also to do with poverty, that you really want to, and it's true for my husband, he would eat and eat and eat and eat. He wouldn't know when to stop, just because, you know, it was always considered part of the culture. Make sure you have a, you know, baby that is really good size, that it's not a skinny baby, and, you know, if something happens, they have enough fat to support them for a few days.
Yeah, I guess it's that as well. It's what you associate it with, isn't it? I think partly cultural and partly just individual, but like in my mum's culture, Poland, it's you feed, food is love. So it's kind of like, if you love your family and you love your kids, you give them lots of food. It's always a eat, you know, people come around, here, have something to eat, you know. And again, that's one of the associations you can make in your mind as a child growing up. You kind of, well, my mum feeds me, therefore she loves me, therefore food must be love, therefore I must eat to feel loved. All of that connection that happens, you know, synapses or whatever you call them in your brain. But all that has to be unraveled and let go of and made conscious.
Well, it's a habit, and it's really difficult to break a habit, especially when you lived with the habit for so many years. Then you think you broke it, and then you come back to it, and then you just go through several cycles until you're completely out of it. You can't just break it in one day. I mean, you can, but you really need to be very, very strong, I guess, willpower, which is not very common for, I guess, hard to meet in terms of not that many people can do that.
Yeah. I think awareness of it is the first step, isn't it? Just being aware, being conscious of it, catching yourself when it happens.
It's nice how we started with politeness and turned to foods. I guess that's what we're meant to do today, talking about food.
Making me hungry.
Well, I have to say, I am enjoying this, having the conversations with you two, the way that the conversation just goes, it's actually a conversation as opposed to a structured thing. Because I think at the beginning we were all thinking we need to get these lists of topics we're going to talk about and stick to them and all of that. But I think it's nice when it flows, because it's just having a conversation.
But it's nice to start with something, right? Something to talk about, and then see where it takes you to.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because otherwise you'll have to okay, what do I talk about? It's nice to have a little bit of a topic to start with, and then you can drift off and make hot chocolate.
Oh, I'm dreaming about this hot chocolate now. There's what do they call it? Golden milk, turmeric milk. That's so nice. I sometimes have that before I go to sleep. That's really nice and settling on the stomach.
Do you have a particular recipe for that you follow?
Just milk with a bit of turmeric and some cinnamon, and just combine the two, and it's just really nice and warming. In the winter, it's lovely.
So it's very similar. I just add fennel seeds and hot chocolate. Yeah. And then you don't even need to add salt and sugar, but I like to add a little bit, just not too much, not to make it overly sweet, just a tad bit. I usually use coconut sugar, but you can use any sugar, just a tiny bit. Makes a difference when it's a little bit sweet, but
So you've got all the taste in there, sweet, sour, bitter.
Exactly, yeah. I found it's quite balanced, and then when you mix it, you need to mix it really rigorously. And then it creates a little bit of foam. It's like...
Do you use a whisk or just a spoon?
A whisk. Oh, I think it was a lovely conversation.
Yeah, should we end it there?
Yeah. Down to business, right?
Unless we have a third topic we want to talk about.
I think I'm good, and I know it's getting late for Kim too, so...
Cool. Take care. Bye.
Bye.